It had been a few months since I did the Quad Revela 1 and 2 reviews, and typically after a review, what I normally do is enjoy the speakers for a couple of days more, especially if I'm overly smitten with them, and then I pack them up and send them back on their way. Only this time, they didn't get picked up right away. Instead, they sat in my walk-in closet taking up space for the next couple of months. And when I did the Monitor Audio Studio 89 review, I wanted to hunt down a comparable speaker to showcase alongside it. And then it dawned upon me, I had the perfect comparable speaker sitting around idly in my closet. So I did what any other audio nutcase would do. Got it unboxed, set it up against the Studio 89s and gave it a second run through. And then, admittedly, I got a bit frisky and I was like, I'll just unbox the Revela 2s because, if I'm being honest, I like that speaker even more. So this is a bit of a revisit to the Revela 1s and the Quad Revela 2s, just to see how they held up. Because I initially did those reviews in a completely different space. It was my old house. It was a larger space. I conducted most of the reviews in the basement. And honestly, the acoustics in the basement weren't as good as they are in my much smaller space now, my condo. So how do they hold up a year on, now in my condo, after I've heard a bunch of different speakers in this space? Are they as good as I once thought they were? If you like videos like this, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. It helped me get more products like this in for review. Cheers. With the Quad Revela 1, because I was A/Bing it against the Monitor Audio Studio 89, the associated gear was the same that I used in that review. Starting with the Monitor Audio Anthra 10 subwoofer, I also implemented my B&W 610 subwoofer, and then I also connected the Cambridge Audio CXA81 Mark II, the Cambridge Evo 150, and the Macintosh MA5300. My listening room is also my living room. It's a dual-purpose setup, so therefore the TV is connected to a Marantz Cinema 60 with the source being an Apple TV 4K, front, left, and right pre-outed to either the Evo 150 or the Macintosh. The Cambridge Evo 150 is an all-in-one, so it has everything in the box that I need to get moving right away. The Macintosh, on the other hand, is just an integrated amplifier, so it needs a little bit of help. That came in the form of the Cambridge CXN V2 streamer connected via XLRs and the CXC CD player connected via coaxial. I rarely use CDs. The CXC is only there just in case for some reason I have to use a CD. Most of the time I stream over CDs. I haven't bought a CD in over a decade. You probably didn't need to know that, but I'm being truthful. But then, I also had some other gear for review, so I took both the CXC and the CXN V2 and then connected those to the TIAC UD507 headphone amplifier, preamplifier, and DAC, and then connected that via XLRs to the Macintosh in fixed mode. It's kind of crazy. And if I'm being honest, I didn't notice a sound difference between those two connected to the TIAC versus going directly into the Macintosh. I just did because I could. And then, of course, I used all the same sources, amplifiers, and subwoofers when I subbed in the Quad Revela 2s for the 1s for this portion of the revisit / my own personal enjoyment. The Quad Revela 1s retail for $29.95 USD for the pair. For that, you get a 1.6-inch by 2.36-inch true ribbon tweeter mated to a 6.5-inch mid-bass driver and a high-gloss speaker that weighs 24 pounds. Sensitivity is 86 decibels, recommended amp power is 30 to 120 watts, nominal impedance is 6 ohms with a minimum of 4.1, frequency response is 54 Hz to 24 kHz with a bass extension of 40 Hz at -6 dB, crossover frequency is 2.9 kHz. I found the Quad Revela 1 really easy to drive. The 80 watts that it has on tap was more than enough power to drive the speaker, ditto for the Studio 89 that I was A/Bing against it. But it did sound a little bit lean for my taste. So I switched out the Evo 150 and that fared much better. Plus, it has tone controls, which automatically gives it a leg up in my opinion, allowing me to plump up the bass by 2 notches. Playing Red Alert from digital, it's a sparsely programmed and spacious drum and bass tune. On the Revela 1s, without a sub turned on, I found it to sound very clean, very spacious, lots of detail, the drums hit nice and hard. But about a minute or so into the track, there is a sub that comes in, and it's able to produce enough of it to give you a hint and an idea that there is bass there. But once I do fire on the Anthra 10 subwoofer, the entire track just rounds out. It has more weight. It feels a bit more spacious overall as well, and I prefer it more. So I left the Anthra 10 on for the majority of my listening and the review, just to give these speakers a fighting chance. With the sub turned on, I played At the Word Souvenirs remixed by Ulterior Motive. I had always loved Ulterior Motive's drum programming. To me, it's some of the best. It's kind of a shame that they're no longer a duo because their tracks were pretty much buy on sight for me. This track, when it drops, hits really hard. The drums, because they're so meticulously programmed, you can hear the stops and starts of all the kicks and all the snares, and when the bass kicks in and that distorted bass kind of rides on top, there is so much slam, so much impact. It sounds amazing. And then also, her voice, it seems like they didn't take too much of the lower end out of it, even though there's so much bass going on in the track. I had the Anthra 10 dialed in at 19% and set to the music slope, and when I A-B'd the Revela 1s against the Studio 89s, I found that the Studio 89s with the dual mid-bass drivers are able to produce a bit more immediacy and impact in comparison to the Revela 1s, which are a bit more, I don't want to say laid back because it's not a laid back sound, but the Revela 1s tend to disappear into the background a little bit more, though it is kind of hard to do that with a driving drum and bass track. Up top, it's pretty much a wash. Both speakers have equal amounts of sparkle, detail, and clarity, and then down low with the subwoofer turned off, there's enough there to give you an idea of what's going on, and depending on the type of music that you're listening to and the size of your room, you can get away without having a subwoofer. But then, if I take a speaker like the Arendal Monitor S THX speaker, it's a much larger speaker overall. It features two 6.5-inch bass drivers and a tweeter sitting inside a deep waveguide. That speaker sounds so much bigger, has so much more impact, and if you're playing music that doesn't necessarily require a subwoofer, like my son Milo is big into Michael Jackson right now, so the Thriller album is on regular rotation, the standout track for me is Billie Jean. It's so well made, and it sounds great on pretty much every speaker that you put it on. And when I go from the Revela 1 to the Studio 89 to the Arendal just sounds so much bigger in comparison to both of these speakers. And it feels like the kicks and the snares just have a little bit more body overall in comparison to these speakers. But it should. It's a bigger speaker overall. And then I switched over to the Macintosh MA5300. That amplifier has 100 watts into 8 ohms, and I don't know what kind of trickery Macintosh did when they made that amplifier, but for whatever reason, every single speaker that I connect to that amplifier sounds better for it. And forgive me, it's hard to quantify this in words, but it feels like every speaker just gets a little bit more oomph out of this amplifier. It's kind of a pain to connect a subwoofer to the Macintosh amplifier, so I didn't for the entire time that I had that amp set up. Plus, by the time I got the Macintosh, the Studio 89s were already on their way back to monitor audio. So I brought in the Revela 2s. It's a smaller in stature 3-way floor standing speaker with two 6.5-inch bass drivers, one 6-inch mid-bass driver, the same true ribbon tweeter as the Revela 1. Sensitivity is 89 decibels, recommended amp power is 2 to 200 watts, frequency response is 40 Hz to 24 kHz with a bass extension of 35 Hz, and the crossover frequencies are 650 Hz and 3.8 kHz respectively. And they retail for $4,495 US a pair. With these speakers connected, both of the aforementioned drum and bass tracks have so much more slam, so much more impact, so much more bass depth. I didn't miss a subwoofer at all. And then when I ran back the Thriller album for Milo, there's just something about a 3-way speaker where a dedicated mid-range just opens up the vocals. It just sounds more clear, more dynamic. I enjoy it so much more. The only time I don't is when he's listening to now. I made the mistake of playing Weird Al Yankovic's Eat It and Fat, and now he can't stop listening to those in place of Michael Jackson, and as much fun as it was initially, now I hate myself for doing that. Vocal music shines on the Revela 2s, and if you're looking for a speaker where you didn't necessarily need a subwoofer, this is the speaker for that. Paired with the Macintosh MA5300, this pairing is pretty amazing. Yes, it's going to cost you, but even just visually, one is black piano gloss, the other one is a shiny black glass front panel. They visually look like they were built to be paired together. And if you're looking for a perfect pairing for this speaker or that amplifier, look at either one. The question that I had initially, though, was, do the Revela 1s and 2s disappear into the background when I'm listening to these speakers now in my new space, which is much smaller than the space that I reviewed these speakers in initially? And honestly, Yeah, they do. In this space, it's a little bit different. It's all dependent on the volume that I'm listening at. With my eyes closed at a low to moderate level, it's a very wide, very deep, very tall, top to bottom sound. But then if I turn it up to ear-splitting levels, there's no denying where the sound is coming from. It's coming at me from two speakers, which is different from my original review where it wasn't as volume dependent in a much larger space. I really enjoyed my extended time with both of these speakers. Both were pretty incredible in their own right. Sadly though, they're both on their way back to quad right now. That sucks.